Board of Trustees of the Village of New Paltz on June 26, 2015 at 7:30 p.m. The public hearing is regarding the adoption of a local law zoning to amend the code to allow residents, local law to allow the residents to make inquiries and complaints directly to the Board of Ethics. Sorry for the zoning board.
Thank you. Is it, Joe or Ariana, do you want to describe briefly what the law is for anyone who's curious? I think you worked on this, right?
No,
that
that
was
was
Stuart.
Stuart.
I'm sorry. Joe, did you work on this with Stuart? Or was it-
Yeah, I mean, I think I did work on it with Stuart, and I believe in his capacity as a liaison to that board, there seemed to be some logic to allowing the public, as written, it was basically almost like an internal referral.
Right. But I think, unless there's something else, the main gist of the law that the public hearing is on now, which I know none of you are here to speak to, is to allow members of the public to ask for the ethics board to rule on violations of our ethics code.
Yeah.
Right
as
now,
it stands now.
right now the public can't, just
Yeah.
officers or trustees. There's no other
That's
major
it,
changes
that's
but
the
that.
change,
Right?
yeah.
Okay.
But it also, not just as a resident, you own a business.
Right.
Correct.
You have an interest in this.
Business or resident.
So anyone here to speak to that? None? All right, I'll move that we close the public hearing.
Second?
Where am I gonna go? And we have a second public hearing. Katie, would you read that notice?
This is going to be a little longer because of the regulations for OCR.
And we have to read this out loud, Mark? You know? No?
Well, Mark says no.
Okay, great. Mark, though, do you want to briefly explain to the public and what this public hearing is about?
You may have seen the public hearing notice we have, which is really long-winded, and it's mostly by formula to satisfy the funding agency of the state of New York.
This is to get grants funding, to submit a grant application for $600,000 to replace sewer lines on Prospect Street, I believe.
Actually,
Platicille, I'm sorry, Platicille.
So I'm going to start by doing something we have to do to satisfy the state funding agency. I'm going to pass around a sign-in sheet. We turned this in as part of the application to show we had a public hearing and to show that the public was present. If you'd be so kind just to pass this around, just need names. Thank you. In short, this is a small cities block grant hearing. We've held these hearings the last few years. In the last 3 years, we've applied for up to $600,000 from the U.S. Department of HUD's Community Development Block Grant Program. That program is administered by the state out of the Office of Community Renewal in Albany. Annually, they have a competition for funds. We are eligible to apply for up to $600,000. Either you get $600,000 for your project or you get nothing. There is a competition. There'll be more applicants than there is money. It's imperative for us to put together an application that is competitive. What the U.S. Department of HUD is looking for are projects that primarily benefit low and moderate income persons. And fortunately, the village-wide is primarily low and moderate income. That solves a serious problem. And when they think of serious problems, they usually think in terms of water, sewer, storm drainage, roads, other public infrastructure that, unless addressed, might affect someone adversely. And we've used the program the last 3 years, and we succeeded 3 years in a row in getting $600,000, $600,000, and $540,000 for some projects. Those include the Huguenot Street sewer that we replaced last year. This year, we just had a contract signing for the replacement of a 20-year-old water tank that is essentially on its last legs and needs to be replaced now under our terms versus on an emergency basis later on. And most recently, we applied last year, and we're designing a project to replace some of the old sanitary sewers within the heart of the village. What we are trying to do with these program funds are to solve serious problems before they become emergencies and require us to spend local taxpayer money to solve them on an emergency basis. For the last 10 years, we have been working to resolve a consent order from the DEC that relates to the old condition of our sanitary sewers. The older sanitary sewers have a lot of leakage. It overloads the plant. It has led to cases where there's been overflowing manholes in the lower portions of the village under extreme storm conditions. Rather than have to pay local funds out of your tax monies to resolve those problems, we've been using grants wherever possible to solve those problems. and to show to the DEC that we're making progress. We cannot resolve all the sanitary sewer issues at once unless you want to spend a lot of money. That's why we're each year trying to find some project that fits well into the competition, that will get money for the village, that won't mean we have to spend local taxpayer money to solve that issue. This year, we have another opportunity to apply. It's through the so-called consolidated funding application. The application is due online on August 12th. We're required to have one public hearing to take public comment. This year's project that was developed by Bernier Larios, in particular our engineer Richard Ruth, is to identify a portion of the overall old sanitary sewer lines that is most susceptible to what they call infiltration and inflow. That's really right out here, Plattekill Avenue. We've got 2,400 feet of sanitary sewer main that predates 1900. That is in some locations collapsing, and in many cases, it is in fact leaky. And a leaky sewer line means that lots of rainwater that gets into that line is going down to the treatment plant, and you're paying for treating rainwater instead of just obviously domestic sewage. That both gives us problems with the DEC, it gives us problems at the plant trying to keep it operating correctly, and also adds to your cost because you're treating maybe 2 to 3 times the normal volume of sanitary sewage when you have a heavy thunderstorm or several days of rain. So what I've done is work with the village engineer and the village board to identify what I think is a competitive project. This, I believe, is quite competitive. We're going to get support again from the DEC. We're going to try to keep the project within $600,000, so there's no local share. And we're going to be applying between now and August 12th. We'll get a yes/no around mid-December. And either you'll hear that we got $600,000 or it's come back next year and try again. So at this point, I'm going to open up the public hearing to questions and comments. I would just ask to make it simple for Katie to identify who you are, so we can identify you in the minutes. The minutes will go into the application, so I ask that people be, certainly let us know what you think about this effort, about our previous efforts, what we should consider doing in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions or comments about the project? No. All right.
I'll move to close the hearing.
I'll second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you for your time, Mark, and nice
Very
work as always. When are the awards announced?
Last year was around December 18th.
So we didn't know in wintertime whether we got the money we're applying for.
Yeah, I can't imagine them waiting till just before Christmas again. I'm really expecting that they'll announce in November.
Okay, great. Thank you. Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Oh, after I get the flag out of my office. I don't know why it's in my office, but...
Did you two plan? I didn't get the memo.
I know, I saw that.
What didn't you get?
The green memo.
No, Joe didn't get it either.
This is the green team.
Is that sign-in sheet still floating around somewhere?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
I don't know. I have no idea why it's there. Someone put it in there.
They might have
There was
done
a conference, the Eco-Socialists did it, I think. They had a retreat conference here a few days ago. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Sorry, I was waiting for you to move your chair.
Mayor Wesky, four additions to the agenda.
Yes. I have 2 of them. Go,
Fire
please.
company is here to talk to us about radios. We have 3 that were on the email marked in the packet as 12, the 12-3 document from Trustee Basco, request from the Historic Preservation, the Shade Tree Commission's input on the stream daylighting project, and discussion on police information sharing.
Could you say those again, just a little bit slower, one at a time?
Sorry.
How many?
It's the Historic Preservation Commission's
Yep.
requests, the Shade Tree Commission's input onto the
Yep.
stream daylighting
Shade
project, and
Keeping on street, obviously, the people who are here.
They're here for public comment.
Public comment, okay.
yeah, I did.
On the agenda.
I was gonna say I did think that they were going to be on the agenda,
Okay.
so I would like
Yep,
to add
no
that
problem.
as well. And
Some purpose.
Yeah.
and oh, I'm aware. but
Is that-
the
we got
police
those?
information sharing. And that's really more to see if anybody else has the same dilemma. So,
Okay.
And the fire company with radios.
Yeah, and there's one other agenda with the board's consent, is that just a conceptual discussion about a possible CFA grant written on our behalf for solar power in the village. But there's not much to that, it's very brief.
I have something.
Yeah?
Might we add the 2 hearings that we had and act on those?
Oh, good, yeah?
Nomination for the Gloucester County Zoning Board.
Yeah?
I don't know whether we need to talk about it, but it would be a good idea, because I think it's this time of year that we ought to put an article in the paper asking for volunteers for the vacancies on all our committees and commissions.
We've actually this week updated everything on the website as far as commissions, committees, and boards, so that way we'll know what we're
About a
missing.
newspaper article.
I think it coincides well.
Jason, did we have we said last meeting we were going to talk about the generator. Are we ready to do that?
We have the old specs, we don't have the new prices. And Nancy, we're going to talk about that. Remember, we have a bunch of things that fold into that bond, the truck, the
Yeah, but do we
hydro
want
hammer.
to get those bid proposals out?
I think it's almost ready, it's July. we're
Okay,
doing
so
that.
we'll do it in July?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
With the bid discussion overall.
And do we need to do anything, or do you just do the proxy thing for Kurt to be your proxy on the Ulster County Transportation Committee?
That one is just me, that's why I got confused
Okay.
with planning board and transportation council, so
And
you're
we've
right with
added-
resolution.
And we've added Huguenot Street,
Yeah,
right?
we added Huguenot Street. Anything else?
That's it for me?
Only 23 items? No problem.
No.
Yep, I'm missing something.
All right, here, copy it. I just wrote down, I can't remember. We'll figure it out in a
Okay,
second.
all right, that's fine.
Well, no, what was the last before planning board? Oh, the 2 public hearings, the local law on
Oh,
ethics
right,
and the
right,
local
okay.
law on the grant application.
Right, and
All right.
donation to the planning.
So with those changes, I'll move to approve the agenda.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Sorry for the housekeeping. Who would like to speak first? Ann? Please.
May I interject for 1 second?
Yeah.
If anyone has a prepared statement and they'd like to hand it to the clerk for being part of the record, I'd be happy to collect it.
Would you be less nervous if you sat?
Hey, Joe, why don't you scoot to the side so I have your back to her? Yeah.
Excuse me, Joe.
I'm going to get out of your way.
Okay.
Thanks.
My name is Ann Quinn, and I live at 107 Huguenot Street. I've lived there for 25 years. And I am here regarding the house next door to us, which was the Corwin family home for over 45 years, owned by Helen and Dick Corwin, where they raised their 3 children. I want to say just a couple of words. I'm going to try to keep this under 7 minutes to give you the Reader's Digest version of what I learned doing this. This process began last March when my neighbor Greg Cannon came over to my house and handed me vacation rental by owners. And it was the Corwin house. And it said sleeps 9, $325 a night, a cleaning service, all done over the internet. We later discovered it was over 3 websites. Thank you, Rebecca, for that. And Greg said, what are we going to do about this? We have to do something about this. So I filed a formal complaint. Sue Wynn filed a formal complaint, Carrie Nick-Sackett, and Greg Cannon and his wife. That's 4 families, totaling 7 people. It was completely ignored and dismissed. So Sue and I began our process of many trips to the building department. I suggested they send the certified letter, which was ignored, to 105, because they have someone who comes periodically and gets their mail. They did read that one and went down to the building department. Sue was told by the owner, I know no one likes what we're doing here, but I want you to know we're going to keep doing it anyway. Okay. So at that point, I love a good fight. I do. And what I discovered was, in this process, we began, Sue and I, for our homes, for our neighbors, for this street that we all love. But what I came to discover is that everyone loves Huguenot Street. It isn't about us anymore. This is the diamond of this community. People from the town said, let us take a petition for you. Jerry Owens took a petition to the Shamgunk runners for all the road races we have on our streets, and the bike races, and the people that walk dogs, and the women that can walk alone because it's safe. And what I discovered is that our community, Huguenot Street, has become a linear park. It's morphed into a linear park. And we see the same people right here every day, walking their dogs, pushing their babies every day. It's turned into a linear park. But above and beyond that, Huguenot Street is a feeder to our local business owners. Those of us who live on Huguenot Street, Sue will tell you, Carrie, we're outside all the time, not a day goes by, if my daughter Erin were here right now, I tell her I should have a little stand like Lucy had in Charlie Brown, tourist information, 5 cents. Where's a good place to have lunch? Where's a good place to have dinner? Is there a farm stand? We want to take vegetables home. We know there's a golf course. Can you tell us how to get there? Karen and Larry are on that signature, the owners of the golf course, as is every business owner we were able to contact. We have 255 signatures, which we got like that. If we'd had more time, we'd have twice that many. So the business owners are, our larger community, and I started to realize Huguenot Street is the diamond of this larger community. And as Joe said, it's the jewel of the Hudson Valley. And we are the stewards of that community. So I'll tell you briefly, in under 7 minutes, I committed to that, what happened. I told you in late March, Greg brought this to the house. He was looking for a vacation rental for he and Kathy. I said, what? What is this? In April, we started getting groups of 7 and 8 and 9 people every weekend. Taxis would drive up, drop people off from the bus, and then a rental car, and then a place in Jersey, place in Mass, place in Vermont. 7, 8, 9 people. I do not blame these renters. Vacation rental weekends, they're here to vacation. They stay up really late. We have 7 and 8 cars in front of our house. The house next door, Sue's house has been occupied by her family since the year 1800. Last weekend, one of their cars was parked on her front lawn.
Saw that.
We've had garbage left on her front lawn for 2 days until we could call the building department and it could be picked up. My driveway is 3.5 feet from their driveway. Not that I want to know who's there, I really don't. They have not lived in this house for 1 week since they bought it. These are 3 men from Brooklyn who said, the real estate agent told me, this is for a family from Brooklyn. They're going to come up on the weekends with their baby, and they're going to be here in the summer for vacations. I'm Snow White, have you seen the 7 Dwarfs? They haven't been here 1 week since they bought the house. They bought it as an investment. It's a cash cow. What happened is we went on the internet to the website. They are making thousands of dollars a month. What I'm really frightened about is the precedent that this sets, because we have absentee investors, I'm sorry for my back to you, with who read the paper online, who read the real estate sales online, right? When they figure it out, these people are making thousands of dollars a month. Bang, something opens up down near you folks. Oh good, we'll break that up into 8 million pieces, vacation rental by owners, until pretty soon we're living in Wally World. Well, here's the problem. This is not Hunter Mountain ski area. This is not the Hamptons. We are not a resort. This is a historic district, and the stone houses are fragile. That's why the traffic, right, Tracy, was abbreviated, because they can't handle all of the density that we're experiencing. People coming in and out, Rich will tell you, my husband Richie here, I'm going back to you here, will tell you the beep blocking, 1:30 at 2 in the morning, oops, the alarm went off, and it's running, they can't figure out how to shut it off. One night, Rich and I both worked, Thursday night, midnight, vacation rentals, people show up, unpacking their groceries, unpacking their bags until about 20 to 1. 2 weekends, their porch is about 20 yards from our bedroom window. I had to go out at 2:30 in the morning to ask people to please be quiet. The following weekend, Rich was away. I had to go out at 2:45, ask them to be quiet, and I would not say in this room what was said to me. It was that vile. Now, in my 8 million trips to the building department, I will tell you this. We have been told over and over and over again to call the police, and I understand that because they want to, document these offenses. I will tell you that I'm not going to spend my life calling the police. And what I mean by this is this. We have weekend renters. So you call the police, quiet down. They go home, they're never coming back again. The next weekend, it's all new people, call the police. Okay, we'll be quiet. Then they're gone, new people. And now because it's summer, we have renters all week long. I just have to say that the precedent that this is setting is very frightening. Again, we are not a resort, and I find it unconscionable that this is allowed to happen on the oldest incorporated street in the country. And I am just very thankful for all of our neighbors who showed up, but also I want to say, not only the village, but the town as well. Everybody has been incredibly supportive to us. And I think what we need to really acknowledge is that it's all of our village, and it's all of our street, and it's the hub of our community. And when anyone has family or visitors, the first thing they do is they bring them to Huguenot Street. And this serene and peaceful environment is so lovely. And I am appalled by the flagrant misuse of this property, which is probably the nicest piece of property on Huguenot Street, but one of two. Yeah. The flagrant misuse of this property, the flagrant misuse of our neighborhood, the abuse those of us have been forced to suffer because 3 men in Brooklyn want to make a lot of money. And not a very good trade-off. So tonight what we are doing is asking our village board members, our mayor, who's been wonderful, he's been on this like white on rice, our village attorney, our city planner, to resolve this issue and to consider an overlay district so that the historic zone is forever protected, so that when my grandchildren walk in 25 years and I'm long gone, it's going to look like it looked when they came to their grandmother's house. That's what I'm hoping and praying for. Thank you for listening. Thank you for showing up.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
Normally we start cracking the whip before 7 minutes, but I'm not cutting off. But when you come with 255 people's signatures behind what you say, we let you go on a little bit longer. So for people watching at home, just so that you can see what I'll read the petition that 255 of your neighbors and business owners read, so you know what's being said here. It's addressed to us here on the village board. The creation of a special overlay district or revision of current code regulations is needed to help protect natural and historic resources, protect against destruction and encroachment upon the national and village historic districts, prevent excessive vehicular traffic, eliminate short-term rentals and the allowance of future multifamily dwellings on Huguenot Street, within the historic district boundaries. We, the undersigned, request the New Paltz Village Board and Zoning Department to develop a special overlay district or revise code regulations for the historic district encompassing Huguenot Street so that the historic character and national significance of the street may be forever preserved. And I just want to say congratulations on this. I think it's fantastic, and this is great.
We got caught in that rainstorm yesterday.
Please.
I am not nearly as eloquent as Anne at all, and I will actually have to read from notes. My name is Sue Wing. I live at 101 Huguenot Street, and as Anne said, my family are Huguenots and have lived there. I've had a family member on Huguenot Street for 250 years. I just want to give you a brief history of some of the issues that we've had with Michael Henry and the other two owners. It's Michael Henry, his brother, and a cousin. Mike Henry started emailing Tom Olson right away when he first bought the house, and did say that he had restored a brownstone in Brooklyn, and was actively involved with several organizations, including the National Park Service, to get on their tax credit rolls. He is also an absentee business owner of a student rental on Church Street. The three owners really have set a bad precedent with us, the neighbors, as well as the Historic Preservation Committee, because they went ahead and did the renovations without getting the proper certificate of appropriateness. They gutted the house without getting the proper permits. They then turned around and rectified the situation and get the permits once this was brought to the attention of the building department. They tore down the entire back porch when they had put in the application saying that they were going to only replace the roof. Again, they turned around and said, mea culpa, okay, we'll do what we need to do. They also placed 2 propane tanks very close to the street and Ann's house, which later had to be removed because they were not, they did not follow code at all. Once the house did pass the occupancy standards, they were never there. It was a very rare occasions that they ever showed up, and that has continued. When we first became aware of the vacation rentals by owner, they were blocked out for only a few weekends at a time. And my reaction to that was, oh, this isn't going to be a big deal because nobody's going to pay. Who has that kind of money to pay that much money for a weekend? And I'm thinking of a nice little family. But instead what we're having is we have Sleeps 9, so we get 9 separate people splitting up the rent and making it affordable. We filed a complaint with the village department, and we have a copy. It's dated and received March 19th. And the complaint was that the business owners were running a hotel that did not conform to code. A cease and desist letter did finally get to Michael Henry, and he did come up and speak with Kurt. At that time, he said that he was not going to stop running this, that he was going to continue to rent out the house. And it is my understanding that this is not allowed under Code 212, I think it's 21241 AA, that the commercial rentals of houses is not allowed.
So I'm going to ask Joe, the village attorney, to give an opinion on the comment once we get a sense of where you're going.
Mike Henry spoke to me after his face-to-face meeting with Kurt, and again stated that he would not stop the rentals at all. But if, and it was a big but, if somebody were to force him to stop the rentals, that he would then have to turn around and rent it to probably students. Full-time rental to students, which, so he followed this thread up with an email, which he reiterated it in writing in this email to me. He also said in his email that the house is blocked off 2 weekends a month for vacation for their own personal use. We know that this is simply not true because we are there and we can see who is there. I mean, we don't, it's not that we're looking, but we see constantly. They have been here 1 weekend in May, 1 weekend in June, and that is it. Currently, we have many weekdays that are also blocked out, and we have been getting more and more weekday renters. In fact, somebody stopped by this afternoon when we were out. it's really a threat. We feel that this is a threat to the character of historic Huguenot Street and the integrity of the street. It's a threat to the neighbors' peace. It's not a compatible usage for us as neighbors. Because they're advertising they can sleep 9, we've had as much as 7 cars, and they're either parking on the lawns or on that street corner. It's a very sharp corner. It's not a good corner to be having so many cars there at all. The traffic congestion, it's unsightly. It certainly doesn't help tourists coming in that are on the other end of Huguenot Street looking down. And the high density of people is really, really difficult. And I won't go through the whole thing again with the police. They did leave garbage, and we did finally get that resolved, but it took a while because the building, it was on a weekend and the building department was closed. Again, this is making it very difficult to regulate this because they are not here. They're never here, so we have no way of really contacting them when there is an immediate problem at all. And I just, again, as someone whose family has been here for 200 years, I'm very aware of the importance of Huguenot Street and the importance of preserving the historical and the cultural element of the street, as well as thinking about the economic draw that it has to this village. It's so important. It's a major tourist attraction to this area. So we again are asking that the board authorize Joe and Kurt to draft a law to address this issue. And I definitely want Tracy to speak as well.
Well, I have a few things to say. Just so, I'm Tracy McNally, I'm the Executive Director of Historic Huguenot Street.
I'm very concerned about historic Huguenot Street, and I was wondering who was here.
Oh, I'm the Historic Huguenot Street.
Perform.
Okay, sure. I'm used to it. A couple things. For those of you who don't know, we have applied for World Monuments Fund status, Huguenot Street. This is how important this street is. It's a very prestigious destination, and it will enable us to get grants that otherwise we might not be able to get. To give you an example of how costly it is to maintain these houses, the Abe Hasbrook House, as you heard last year, reopened after 10 years of almost being closed. It's only about 2 houses away from this house. $1.2 million for that one house. To take down the north wall on the Jean Hasbrook house, which is on the corner of North Front Street and Huguenot Street, that one wall was $500,000 just to take it down, repoint it, restore the Dutch windows that were there, and put it back up. And one reason we've applied for World Monument status is you have to be a site that, if it goes, it's irreplaceable. And this isn't just about Ulster County in New York State. This is American history. That road is one of the most important roads in the United States of America.
It's the oldest one in America.
Yes, but these houses do not exist anyplace else. There is no example of this Dutch architecture preserved anyplace else in the United States, not in the tip of Manhattan. One reason why Cuomo just named us one of the top 200 sites in New York State is because we are authentic. If you go to Plymouth Rock, you see a nice rock. There are no pilgrims' houses there anymore. They don't exist. You go to Williamsburg, you come across conference centers that I'm sure were not there when the settlers were there. I mean, it's really, there are not that many really authentic, pure places that have been preserved. And we don't want to add conference centers. We want it to, look as much as it looked back in 1677 when we signed the deed for the Indians to purchase the property. But even more important than that is the wear and tear on the road. And that's the real issue here. There's the nuisance of them being loud and all that, which is just obnoxious, but I'm talking about more the wear and tear on these houses, the more traffic that's on there. Quite frankly, the road should be closed from North Front Street up to Broadhead at the very least. It should be a park-like setting. In any place in the United States, I think probably, you know, it would be. Other places in New England, when they have these kind of historic places, they do a very good job of preserving them and making them park-like settings. So I'd love to see that happen to Huguenot Street, because again, it's not just about New Paltz in New York, it's about American history. And the cars, I mean, and I'll stop at this point, but there's 2 feet between that road and these houses. Those roads were dirt roads. They were not designed for the traffic that is now on Huguenot Street and the buses. And people, you know, come down that road, drunk students come down that road, and I just cross my fingers that they don't go into one of these houses.
Doesn't the Reformed Church have some concern about parking? Sundays?
Well, the Reform, they can park in the church parking
I
lot.
know, it's spread along the street. It comes up along the corner, you know, and
They do, they come right up Broadway.
they're sure. And
You
so-
can get to it.
And you have to
We've closed the
sometimes
street
close off
many
Mulberry
times.
Down to, you know,
You
down.
can get to it. We've
Let's,
closed,
let's bring it back to the,
but that's
It's a
another
housing
discussion.
issue.
But I'm just more concerned about preserving these houses and the wear and the tear and the increase in traffic on the street.
thank you. Michael, and then Tom.
This is public comment, so I actually I have 2 things. One is about the street, but one is not about the street. So let me just deal with that one first. So I'm Michael Zeeler. I am a member of the Village Planning Board. I'm not speaking here tonight as a member of the Village Planning Board, but my first comment actually has to do with the Village Planning Board. We currently have a vacancy, and we also have 2 vacancies in alternate positions. I would urge the village board, when you have suitable candidates, to try to fill those as expeditiously as possible. In addition,
Conveniently, we have 3.
okay, well, that might be a good fit. In addition, I've asked that the village board consider modifying the code as it exists for alternates for the village planning board and the village zoning board, because at the moment, it's just based on New York State law, which basically says that alternates are only allowed to sit at the table and vote if there is a conflict of interest by pertaining to one of the full board members, be it planning board or zoning board. You have the opportunity to make that more liberal and allow them to sit even if somebody's just absent. They're required to come to all the meetings, and therefore they should be up to date on issues. So those are my 2 comments about that. As far as Huguenot Street goes, I am a near neighbor of Huguenot Street. I live just off of Huguenot Street. I walk that street every day, at least twice a day. I'm also a member of the advisory council for historic Huguenot Street. So those are all my relations. I think what has been suggested to you is very admirable. I think if you have an opportunity to consider an overlay, that would be great, because it would make it possible to tailor this not only to Huguenot Street, but to perhaps the other appropriate places in the village. There is a caveat, though, which is that if you're going to make a change to the zoning code, as you all know, but other people may not, it will take some time. You're required to draft a law, you're required to send it to the zoning board, we have the opportunity to look at it. I think we have 30 or 45 days to respond. There has to be public hearings and so forth. This could take months. Not to say you shouldn't do it, but I think you have enough in your code right now to do whatever it is that you need to do. Sue referred to one portion of the code that exists that might be of service. Section 212.13, I believe, which specifically refers to the historic district, makes it clear, as does Schedule A, the use schedule, that there are only 2 business uses, specifically business as categorized in Schedule A, that are allowed on Huguenot Street, or rather in the historic district. Both of those require special use permits. One of them is bed and breakfast, the other is commercial parking lots. I'm not sure why commercial parking lots, but they are. I'll also point out there's a discrepancy in the village code, or another one, which is that Schedule A does not allow any other business uses. However, within 21213, where it lists allowable uses by special use permit, it also includes hostels. This is clearly a business that they're running there. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And therefore, at the very least, they would have been required to file an application with the planning board to request a special use permit for either a hostel or a bed and breakfast, probably not a commercial parking lot. In the event of a bed and breakfast, they would be required to have somebody on site at all times, either the owner or their agent. A hostel, it's a little less clear that would be required. However, they didn't do any of that. So it seems to me that part of the problem is not that the code doesn't allow you to do something, and it sounds like the building department and code enforcement have been attempting to do this, and the owner has been non-compliant. What we have is an enforcement problem. We don't seem to have the teeth to shut this thing down. And if, as you're hearing tonight, this is not just a random house on a random street, but a particular house, one in a historic street, and perhaps one of the most notable ones in the United States of America, it seems to me that this kind of thing should be able to be shut down immediately. That if this needs to go to town court, it should have gone already. That the justice needs to deal with it. In the past, the building department had a building department attorney. I don't know if they currently have one or if they're working with the village attorney. But this should be a top priority in which you can expedite this process. The threat of student housing, frankly, I hate that people use students as scapegoats. All right? In defense of students, student housing is not all bad. They could rent, and students and people who are drunk driving down the streets, Tracy, with all due respect, are not necessarily students. Yeah. So I prefer that we leave student out of this, and if they wish to use that as a disparaging threat, let them. The fact of the matter is that whether we do it in this town or not, or this village, student rentals are businesses as well, and they should be held to a certain standard of quality of life and for both the people living there and the people not. But the point is, I think we have an enforcement issue. And to the extent that you can both deal with this on one track to develop appropriate zoning changes, but more importantly right now, on a parallel track, try to find ways to put a stop to this as quickly as possible, whether it involves the police, the attorney, town justice, building department, all of them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Nyquist?
I'll make my comments brief. I'm speaking here this evening as chair of the Nyquist Foundation that owns the Nyquist Harcourt Wildlife Sanctuary adjacent to Huguenot Street, and also as a board member of the Huguenot Historical Society and as treasurer. What truly distinguishes the village of New Paltz from almost every other community in our country are the 7 stone houses on Huguenot Street that date back more than 300 years. The residence in question, the former Corwin House, lies in the heart of the historic district, only 100 feet from the closest stone house and less than a block from the magnificent Reformed church built in 1839. What happens to the former Corwin residence is not only of consequence to the immediate neighbors, but to the very integrity of the historic Huguenot Street. Historic Huguenot Street is a treasure that has been recognized nationally as a National Historic Landmark and warrants your protection as stewards of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Nyquist. Anyone else? I know public speaking is the #1 fear in America, so don't be concerned if you don't want to speak. It's also fine, if you liked what someone said, it's fine to just raise your hand and say, I agree with Michael or Ann or whoever. So whatever you'd like to do. Yes, Paul. Oh, Paul, you're waiting in the back.
I'll keep it brief. I live in the town, but I care about the village. You know, many of, we are consolidated emotionally and psychologically, what they said.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, Randall, please.
One of the things that I would suggest I'm the chair of the police commission, so what I would suggest is that we set up a meeting and sit down with the chief, and perhaps patrols can be increased until we figure out how you guys are gonna deal with this, perhaps.
Thank you, Randall.
And, you know, they can keep a little better watch on what's going on there. I mean, I don't know what ticketing can be done, but,
Well,
you know, you can
we do
see.
have a problem with through trucks.
Yeah.
They're not allowed, but they do.
Yeah.
And that's a major problem.
Well, we'll connect and we'll set up a meeting with the chief and try and get something.
Great, thank you, Randall. And before we have Kurt, our Director of Planning, and Joe, the village attorney here, get them to say something briefly in response or to fill in gaps. But just because I think Andy has mentioned about frustration of having to call the police. I think Randall would agree that it can be incredibly useful for us to get the enforcement done more effectively. As Michael said, it's more of an enforcement issue apparently. I did call, just so you know, and the neighbors know, I did call the chief last week. I went and spoke to the most recent tenants. I haven't spoken to the property owner yet. But the chief, I asked him to notify me whenever there's a complaint, a noise complaint at 105 Huguenot Street, so I'm going to know shortly after the police do. But also he said that there's never been a complaint filed. So that can be very helpful, even though if it is a hassle. If you can't take the time, if there's a complaint, noise complaint at 12:30, 1 o'clock at night, that's why we pay the police. They're just doing their job to help us out. And it can diffuse situations so it doesn't get to the level of frustration and really worsening relations. But with that, Kurt and Joe, and we won't end public comment yet. And just so you know, you don't have to talk about Huguenot Street or something else you'd like to say, please feel free as well. But Kurt and Joe, just briefly, if you want to address this Huguenot Street issue. Yeah, obviously, yeah.
If I may, Kurt, and this may suffice, Kurt can obviously jump in and add to this, but I think the code as written right now makes the use as it's being run right now, certainly what it's escalated to at this point, maybe not necessarily when the first complaint started to come in and when the landlord was sort of denying a specific type of use, etc. It seems to me that the code prohibits the use. There were, as we have noted from the beginning of our time together, there are some inconsistencies in the code that sometimes make enforcement difficult that we have tried to address with recent zoning amendments. This may be yet another example of a place that will allow us to hone those definitions even better and continue to do a better job. And it would be my recommendation that we should do that. And I have several ideas for how we can prevent this sort of use in this sort of district. I don't think there's any question that we can address it that way. And that would include a broader provision which would not amend a zoning code, which could allow it to be more speedily adopted, but that would potentially give all of the provisions of the code more teeth in terms of what exactly we can do to enforce it, like civil actions that include injunctions to shut them down, things like that. That could be something that could move even more quickly to help us, even with what's on the books now, to be more readily enforceable, something with a little more of a hammer than just a citation. The challenge, I think, that the building department faces is that their hammer is the citation. And as these folks have said, when a tenant is, or when an owner is making thousands of dollars on something, paying the occasional $250 fine for not being in compliance with the code may not exactly do the trick to really shut it down. So there's no question, I think, that if the board wants to act on this, code amendments should be authorized. I know that Kurt, I've talked with Kurt at length about this. I know we're both anxious and have ideas on how we can do that. The enforcement provision that I'm talking about could be adopted even more quickly, and I will, together with Kurt, and maybe as part of this meeting that you're talking about, also investigate every potential for compliance in our current code to act on this immediately, including potentially things like acting on the CO. And even things like advertising.
Certificate of occupancy.
Certificate of occupancy. And even identifying maybe more creative things like, if this is out there online and it's not a use that's allowed, maybe we should go online and, I'm not a computer guy, but I bet you there's a way to have some kind of pop-up that when you put your credit card in that says, by the way, you should know you can't do this. I mean, so.
I don't think so.
So my point is, it's the pleasure of the board. There's no question in my mind that there are some aggressive actions and creative actions we can take on the basis of the present code, because the facts are now overwhelmingly in favor of the kind of use they're really running. And all of those other initiatives that have been discussed tonight by the members of the public are also things that we're ready to look at.
Kurt, anything you want to add to that?
Joe, thank you. As a matter of fact, Joe...
You can wait if you want.
Sure, as it winds down. Joe, as village council, I had convened a meeting in the last 2 months between myself, Joe, and our newly appointed code enforcement municipal code officer, Holly Esposito, when we talked about this, where we were on it, and where we wanted to go. And indeed, the first thing I want to give credit to is the complaint itself was extremely detailed, and we would not even be on our way or have been able to issue that first notice of violation were it not for the detailed and careful preparation and very insightful and knowledgeable information such as vacation rentals by owner. And it was only after that I began to see literature on it in certain planning trade publications, as well as something that Sue Wynn provided directly to me recently, which is comes from the University of Nevada School of Law, which is extremely detailed on this subject. And what I mean to say in that regard is that this is a relatively new thing for municipalities to confront as far as when it becomes an issue. Other municipalities and other places, especially perhaps with large numbers of foreclosures, may have a totally different take on this from what I understand in reading national planning publications. But we know exactly our take on it here in the village and in Greater New Paltz with regard to the Huguenot Historic District. So one of the, if we can proceed under that it's being run as a business. If we think we have the evidence, then we'll move forward immediately with that. However, there's probably a better and more permanent solution, and that would include restricting, or I should say prohibiting, short-term vacation rentals. And while it may not be exactly as straightforward as enforcing the height of grass when it gets too high under our code, nonetheless, I believe it's workable. It needs to be carefully done. And the other thing I want to state is that, and this actually, of course, goes beyond our Huguenot Historic District and really to include the entire village. But the notion of single-family districts and their meaning and their intent, terms such as neighborhood stability and general enjoyment of one's property, general peace and good order, these are not flimsy terms. They have real meaning, and they can be the real basis for legislation, and they can be enforced. So again, I note that the residents in this neighborhood and beyond have certainly witnessed enough by now, and I'm happy to work with Joe on something that would be a more permanent solution.
Kurt, when this all came up, and I'm aware of the situation, Tom is aware of the situation, Rebecca is, I think we all are very concerned. The trick was that they were advertising it as a vacation rental house, whatever that means. And because that's not a hotel, it's not a motel, it's not a B&B, nothing could be done. But a discovery was made, and I think we can shut them down immediately. They are advertising on a site called Airbnb. So they are advertising themselves as a bed and breakfast, which clearly, as Michael pointed out, are prohibited without a special use permit in that particular district. So I think that we should shut them down immediately for being in violation because they don't have a special use permit. And here is the proof, because they're advertising as a B&B as opposed to a vacation rental, which is sort of a nebulous thing in our code. But our code clearly says that you can't have a B&B in the historic district without a special use permit. So I think that's one way to go. I love the idea of the overlay district. I think we ought to do that and start that process immediately, because I agree with Michael, it's gonna take time. The violation of the B&B only solves one problem, but the overlay, if we can get that into place, will solve the entire problem in the future for people that might want to do that. And I hope we will come up with a definition of single family.
Yes, as a matter of fact, that's a related topic, but I'll save that for another time. But there's an awful lot of overlap in the issues that were raised tonight with regard to what's going on at 105 Huguenot, and even again the sanctity and the legislative intent for the zoning districts we create, and so that pertains to residential districts throughout the village. And again, I'm happy to report that these terms such as traffic and order and peace and bless you, and that these things absolutely have meaning, even if they sound more qualitative and not so quantifiable. They can be quantified, in fact, certainly enough to be enforceable. Thank you.
But can we?
That's a question for Joe.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna take it back to the audience, so please, Joe.
Advertising online is a B&B and it's prohibited.
Yeah, I mean.
Is that enough evidence?
You know, it is what it is, not what they say it is. It's more about what they're actually doing there than it is where they advertise it. But it's
Airbnb is also, it's called that, but it's mostly apartments that are being rented and not bed and breakfast when you look at the website. So I see where you're going with it, but will really depend upon definitions in our code, I think, more so than the fact that they're advertising on Airbnb.
And it also
But if they are defining themselves as a B&B area, they're advertising on the standard B&B.
But it's not a standard B&B website. It's like if I wanted to rent my house out and I wanted to rent my room on a monthly basis.
Rentals.
That's what Airbnb does.
What it really comes down to, though, again,
People
is
find
not
places to
what
live
if you
based on
call a duck a chicken, it don't make it a chicken.
Right.
The issue is what is the breadth of our enforcement ability right now. And that includes things like potentially pulling the CO, because it's probably got a CO as a residence.
Right.
I mean, so those are things, and I don't want to speak, it wouldn't be entirely off the cuff, because it's not like I didn't know this conversation was coming.
Right.
But again, I wanted to get the will of the board, obviously. So I don't want to lay this all out there tonight.
How long would it take, Kurt and Joe, how long would it take for you to get us recommendations about the next steps? What our options are? Both short and long term.
Short term, I think within the next week, I mean.
I'm sorry, let me interrupt you, because we may be being.
Meaning our enforcement.
Yeah. Before, because we could just go right into resolving this, but, yeah, public, I was making sure there's no public comment. Yeah, Michael, in the back, please. We'll come back to this, but I want to make sure there's not someone waiting for public comment that's not about this issue.
No, it is about this issue. It's a postscript. I apologize. I didn't say it earlier. But it's relevant to what you all are talking about. You can confirm or deny this, but it's my understanding that as an elected body and appointed bodies have this authority as well, you can subpoena records.
against claims against the village.
Yeah, I mean, if a citation has been
Does this
sent and so forth,
rise that standard?
and if they're willing, regardless, if they're not complying, if it's possible, I suggest that you subpoena all their records, financial records, calendars, credit card receipts, invoices, and that you do that both to develop a basis for perhaps then having the evidence to shut them down, and also because it's an interference for them. And,
Joe, because we looked into subpoena power regarding Wilmorite, does this rise to the threshold of this, or
I think
formal
that-
claim in court?
Yeah, I think that's in connection with claims against the village.
Okay.
But I'll look at it, and I will say this, I can pretty much guarantee you that if we take the kind of aggressive action that I sense we may be authorized to do, they'll be coming up with records if they have them, and if they can't, because they can't support a defense.
Okay, well,
But I'll look into it.
I'm extrapolating, but I do know that you and the planning board and the zoning board have the authority to subpoena people to appear in front of you. So I just.
Right, at a hearing.
At a hearing
Yeah.
or something, and so, anyway.
Right. I'll certainly look into it.
But as far as code enforcement, you can do that and should be doing it right now. You don't need the board's authorization to do that.
Yeah, they're enforcing the code now with the tools we have.
But Joe just brought up something about certificate of occupancy. If they have a certificate of occupancy as a resident, and in fact, they are operating a business, that's a violation of code.
But I do want to, again, I hate to do this, and I know this is why people can't stand lawyers. I just want to make clear that it's not like most things. It's not quite as clear as you would want it to be, and I'll just give you a couple of examples. These days, COs are written very specifically to say exactly, how many rooms and what exactly it's CO'd for, et cetera. In the old days, you used to get a thing called a CO, and it just meant people could move in. And so sometimes the COs don't have the level of specificity and I don't want to suggest that's the case here. I have a feeling we can do this. Things like renting rooms out, you say to yourself immediately, well, that's got to be, we got them, right? But actually, for a long time, before this rather new phenomenon, right, people actually encouraged the idea of being able to rent rooms out without classifying as a commercial use, because it was one of the ways that kids and seniors could stay in a community, was by renting a room. So you didn't want to necessarily write a law that said you can't do that. These are the kinds of things I really want to say. I know this has been frustrating, and I know that the building department has felt really challenged by this and really obligated to do something about it. It's not that easy, and it has to be done right, or all you end up with is a lost lawsuit, and then you really miss things. So I believe there are mechanisms for enforcement which Kurt and I can lay out for you within a week.
Okay.
We'll meet specifically on it. We'll do that, and then the larger issue, depending on how you direct us tonight, as I said, beefing up our enforcement provisions in general would not require a referral to the planning board, because it wouldn't be a zoning amendment, and it could be done fairly quickly, and as quickly as you could get notice done and a meeting and a hearing, et cetera. And then the larger zoning issues would probably take 2 to 3 months. But you got a whole street to protect there. So we can talk about this building, and then we can talk about the future.
I did want to ask Kurt one question. I mean, I like the idea of the overlay, and I understand what you're saying. But are there specific items vis-a-vis the historic designation of the street which we can entertain as an amendment to the code to tighten up that specific district?
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
I'd like to move that the board ask that that be done, plus the overlay.
Thank you. Actually, I think
Rebecca second.
I'm sorry, I should have this out.
Before we start to get into it, let me just one last time. Anyone else for public comment before we make? Can we not make motions until after public comment? Is that, yes, ma'am, and then sir here. Yes.
And I just want to ask a quick question. Kurt, what do you represent? I don't know what your function is in this.
Yes, of course. For the last year, I've been a village planner for the village of Mid Falls.
Oh, I see. I just didn't know what agency.
Staff planning, director of planning.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You had a point to make?
On Huguenot Street, a number of years ago, I was told by Allison Murray, who was the building inspector at that time, that because you live on Huguenot Street, your property is assessed at a higher value. And the taxes reflect that. And being that we accepted that, essentially, here we have a hotel being established on our street. And if problems like that persist, we're going to wind up with lowered property values, and that affects me personally.
Yes, sir.
Hey, I'm Chris Watkins. I wanted to just make two comments. One as a private citizen and then one as a member of the village, the Library Board of Trustees. A private citizen on the issue of Huguenot Street may have been considered by Ann and your group, but you might also want to consider contacting the sites that they advertise on, VRBO, Airbnb, if you find that there's enough basis to say directly that they're violating the village code. As a member of the Board of Trustees of the library, you have before you tonight a resolution to designate parking space on Platic Hill closest to Main Street that's facing Main Street as a handicap or ADA compliant parking space. And we have submitted a letter on behalf of you doing that, on behalf of our patrons who have accessibility issues, and that has been a primary concern of the library to increase accessibility. That would be a step in that direction, and I know our planning director has supported that, so we hope that you'll support that as well.
Great, thank you, sir. Any other public comment? Any topic? Do you don't have?
Well, I have something to say in regards to the Airbnb issues.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, we have announcements from the board too, but we can.
Okay, well, I just want to say, well, many of you are still here. I recently found out a little more information about these types of websites that host rental properties. And one thing that you can do is write in complaints. You don't necessarily have to have stayed at one of them, but most of these agencies, if they get enough complaints, they will drop a property. So I'll try to find the other sites that I had found and email them to you both, and then just spread them around, have people go to the sites and voice complaints about this particular property. Because we also just found that it's booked for the next 7 days.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Did you check Craigslist too?
Oh.
How's it?
Yes, sir.
One additional question, really, for the attorney. Can this, even if the village code has changed to reflect the desire of the people who live here, does that property automatically get grandfathered in because it existed before the change of the code?
It depends on the precise nature of the zoning change. And so again, I'm going to give you an annoying lawyer's answer. As I sit here tonight, I will tell you I don't think so. I don't think it would be grandfathered. In part, that's because technically, as has been pointed out, if the use was classified as a commercial use, it wouldn't be permitted there anyway. So there's nothing to grandfather in. But again, I want to be careful. It is a many-faceted issue, and so I don't want to overstate a legal position tonight and be accused of misleading. But my sense as I sit here is no, not.
That's very important, and I think initially that village council's take on that is absolutely correct. A lot of times I speak with folks about grandfathering or what we might call pre-existing legally non-conforming uses. Those are rather specific, and in this case, just as village council said, there is nothing. You must first have a legitimate use established, and the burden for once is not on the village, but rather on the owner to document that type of status. So that's something I'm hopeful about.
So for instance, if they were running a commercial parking lot and had a special permit for that 10 years ago, and then we made commercial parking lots illegal on Huguenot Street, that would be a different issue. So but believe me, that's one of the things that's on my plate to take a look at.
Okay, let's, unless there's any other public comment? Last chance? Okay. And you have a motion on the floor.
Yep.
Can you restate that so we're clear?
Katie, do you have it?
Going back to it.
Are there any announcements by the board while she's looking? No?
It's
Okay.
it's a threefold motion. One, to receive recommendations from the planner and the planning board review regarding tightening up the whole historic district concept. Two, propose an overlay district as appropriate. And three, to, because commercial properties are prohibited on Huguenot Street, whether they are advertising on vacation rental, hotel spaces, or B&B, using the property for commercial purposes and therefore are in violation of the code and do the building
Is this?
That's an extended, that's significantly extended than what I had, but I took that.
So that's like a 3-paragraph motion. Can we get it down to, what, do you want to hear Katie's?
I had that Sally moved to go on the recommendations of the planner and the attorney.
Folks, could you just please keep it down as you're heading out? Thank you.
The recommendations of the planner and the attorney in the purposes of enforcement and also for them to propose the overlay district to us.
Rebecca did second that, okay? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all for coming out. We'll have some more answers for you, if not the final ones. Sure. I'll move the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right. Fine. We just take a minute.
Thank you.
Let's just take a minute. Rebecca's helping us with the lift and people are shuffling out.
Yeah.
Take 5. Take 5.
Anne, I love your dress.
Hi, Sue. What a lovely job you did.
Oh, thank you. I've never, ever done anything like this again, before, and I don't think I could ever do it again. It's not my thing. I wanted to give you that, since you said
Yes.
you could take that.
Yep.
And I hope you can eat the little bit of the chicken scratch.
No, I
But,
can.
But that's it. That's the emotion.
No, that's great. Thank you so much, Sue.
You're welcome.
Oh, thank you. Would you like to see him? It's not bad. They're having a little trouble getting used to each other, but unless there's some party, I have to see mine as my senior mattress above the floor and my No, it's not. It's not. Pet drive. It's possible.
So you have to have, so it's not just panic zones, but you have to have.
They were making for him.
Otherwise, people could be.
At the time, they didn't say, you know you're being, for us, we're completely off. There's no record of what I'm saying, right? I just need to make sure that nobody, that this is not a false statement. Absolutely. I just think they're from this area.
They're not in good. We're going to keep doing Yes, that's the kind of evidence. In fact, we're everybody done the consent agenda.
Our loyal firefighters are back in the room, so let's put them up next. Chief, you want to? It's like, what was it, cartoon character? No, not Chief and Chief.
No, me.
I was in the Crows. Who was it? Anyway, whatever. What's the issue with the radio?
So basically, the radio system that I'm looking for you guys to address is a system that we've had in place for about 10 years in the fire department. I'm not looking to purchase all brand new radio equipment. I'm looking to change the way that we do business with NICOMCO, which is New York Communication Company out of Poughkeepsie, correct, Patrick? Poughkeepsie. They supply our airtime for these radios. We pay about $700 a month to Nycomco for airtime and the general maintenance of the radios that we own. As I said, it's about $700 a month, so it's however much a year, $8,400 a year, somewhere in that neighborhood, which I budgeted for. Something has come to light now that I can enter into a lease agreement with Nycomco, and by doing so, all of our portable radios and our mobile radios and the apparatus and the chief cars would be replaced immediately with the latest technology at no cost to us, and all of these radios would actually be owned by Nycomco and just leased by us. The benefit of that would be that if we have a portable radio that gets damaged at a fire, we just bring it over to Nycomco in Poughkeepsie, hand it to them, and they hand us a brand new one. The way we operate now, under the agreement we have with Nycomco now, is if we damage a portable radio, we can bring it to them, and any general maintenance on it would certainly be covered by our agreement with them, but parts and things like that beyond the general maintenance of the radio, we would pay for. If it was damaged beyond repair, we would have to buy a new one at a cost of, the portable radio that Patrick has is about $850, and we have in the neighborhood of how many of those, Pat? 22. So it's a sizable investment. We entered into this agreement with Nycomco probably about 10 years ago under previous administrations. We purchased all the equipment, which was not a bad decision, but now I think the proper way to do it would be enter into a lease agreement. So really what I'm looking for you guys to tell me is it's okay to change the way I do business with Nycomco.
What's the monthly after the change?
It would go from about $8,400 a year to, well, it was $700 a month. It'll go to about $1,500 a month. So it's pretty much double. But along with that agreement, every 2 to 3 years, as soon as new technology comes out, all of our stuff gets taken out of the apparatus and new stuff gets put in at no charge to us. Personally, I think as much as I am against leasing, which Jason, you know about, I think in this aspect with equipment that pretty much as soon as you buy it, they're working on new, better.
Right.
It's much like cell phones, things like that. You buy radios today, and this time next year, those same radios are just.
Well, we kept the budget pretty tight, Chief.
I do keep my budget tight.
Where are we getting
That's-
money, you think?
I budgeted the
Equipment reserve is
$8,400,
always there.
which I anticipated paying. Doubling that, I can certainly cut other things throughout the course of the year to make that.
So we're
doable.
willing to go without certain other things because this is more important right now?
I think this is the right way to continue on doing business. The radios we have are pretty much to the point now where it's not really cost effective to keep repairing. We send one portable out and it's $250. We send another portable out, it's $400, and it's just.
If you take a mobile radio out, it's gone for 2 weeks because they can't get parts for the system anymore. The radio frequency that we operate is off of the Illinois Tower. As everybody knows, radio receptions down in the village, parts of the village, Town and Country Condo, 32 North is all dead zone. They don't work.
Right.
With the new technology, we'll be bouncing off of another tower also. Now we'll have 2 towers operate.
Where's the second one? The one's up on the Illinois Mountain, right?
Illinois Mountain, the other one's gonna be up on Elba.
Okay.
And this can't hold 2 towers.
The technology that's out there is so much better than 10 years ago when we purchased these.
Right.
They served us well, without question, but it's time for them to be replaced. Either we buy everything brand new and own it, which I could give you figures for that, but, or we enter into a lease agreement on a monthly basis, and then in 2 years, Nycomco calls us up and says, listen, there's newer stuff on the market, it's much better.
Right.
Let's set up a date to come over and take all your stuff out, and we'll put it all back, all new stuff in.
So currently, there is some of the money that is going to be like repairing these essentially. Could some of that
I
be
do have a separate,
reallocated for?
I have a line item in my budget for Nycomco for the airtime for $8,400.
Right.
And I also have a separate line item that specifically deals with radio repair. So yes, that would be substantially, not nearly much as you.
What was that, $2,000, $1,200?
I think it was 2,500.
2,500. So,
what is it?
I mean, I can't tell you that I'm not gonna have to have radios repaired, but it certainly should be on a
Right.
regular basis.
Sally, what do
So,
you?
so what you're looking for is approval to move to a lease agreement, the cost differential, if there is any, between the radio repair line and will be absorbed within.
I can absorb that within my budget over the
Okay, I'll
next
move
fiscal year.
it to.
Second.
Discussion?
Nope.
My only question is, do we want Joe to review the contract and Nancy to weigh in, make sure, to confirm that where the money is being transferred from before we enter into it?
I think
The
they,
budget, I mean-
they won't know that yet,
Yeah.
but I would think when the lease agreement comes for your signature, we would have to approve the lease agreement.
Yeah, so we need to get to see the contract.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm just wanting
Yeah.
clarity that we're not voting to
No,
approve
you're
any
not.
contract right now.
Just-
Yeah.
I'm gonna, now we can actually reach out to Jeff Supan, who is our field guy for Nycomco, and say, you know, we've got kind of preliminary approval to move forward with this.
Okay.
Let's get the lease agreement and get some final numbers on the table.
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah, that's
Awesome.
perfect.
I just want a point of clarification. So I'm, just adding and subtracting here, and I'm coming up with you're needing to expend approximately $7,100 in the course of your first year, more than you had budgeted for
Correct.
this kind of communication.
It's about that way.
And you can confirm for us then that that's easily within your scope for...
I can absorb that in other places in my budget by not getting 10 of these. Instead of getting 10 of these, I'll get 8
I
of
got
these.
it. Okay.
That way.
Thank you.
Yes, no problem.
Any other questions? All right, all in favor? Okay.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Chief.
No
Yeah,
problem.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do you want to be the?
But don't call me individually.
Oh, yeah, let's just do this. If the board doesn't mind, we didn't do this yet, but the chief has a letter to us basically asking us to pre-approve any, sending any of our firefighters to New York State Office of Fire Prevention trainings. Because sometimes they fall between our meetings and can be a
I'm
pain.
sorry I just dropped that on you guys tonight. It should have been at the reorg meeting, which it normally is.
I thought we
I
voted
know
on
we
that.
did. We did.
Was that the
We approved
reorg?
Training.
I thought we approved training.
We did.
Okay. The scope of that, basically,
pull up my
for Rebecca and Tom, is a lot of my firefighters will come up to me and say, listen, there's a class starting next weekend up at the State Fire Academy, which is in Montour Falls by Watkins Glen. Hey, listen, there's a class next weekend I'd like to go to. I got off of work. For me to send him up there is going to be, for the weekend, it's about $120 for room and board. And I can't send him up there until I get pre-approval from the village, which chances are there's not going to be a meeting between now and then, so they'll miss out on the class. And that is classes that are specifically approved classes by New York State Fire Academy, New York State Office of Fire Prevention Control. There's many other programs, training programs out there that my guys might want to go to that are not New York State classes, and when that situation arises, I'll seek your approval for that.
Did we approve it already? Sally?
I have it in the minutes. It's approval of advanced approval of trainings.
Resolution for the fire department training expenditure. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
It's the.
Yeah, we already approved it.
Every year we do this. And
Yeah,
I just didn't get letter in for the rework.
Oh, you need that letter, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
We did.
Let's see.
already.
Hold on.
Good.
You did without me even knowing.
Exactly.
Good.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Pat. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, this is good. Is anyone here for anything specific on the agenda? No, just in general?
The parking
You
spot.
want to do Shade Tree?
Well, it's, that's what I'm asking, if anyone is here for a specific agenda item.
Yeah,
Yes?
shade tree.
Shade tree? Okay. And what else? Oh, the ADA
Yeah.
parking space. All right. So let's just do this first. I'll move to approve the, actually, Joe, we need to write a local law that does any space.
We need to amend the local law that was already
Amend the local
written.
law, we have to have a hearing.
Right, so local law. I'll move that to direct the attorney to draft the local law to
To
install
amend.
the, install the what, yeah, sorry, ADA compliant parking space. I got distracted by other.
I'll second with the friendly.
I have a discussion.
All right, wait, stay, hold on, one at a time, please. All right, second with what friendly what?
A friendly amendment because we're amending the current law.
It's still a local law. We passed a whole other local law, but
Well, no, we don't have to pass a whole other law. We can just amend. Remember earlier this year we did the handicap parking?
right. But Joe, could you clarify that? It's a local law is a local law, is my understanding.
Yeah, I mean, it's adopted in the same way.
Same process. I mean, it's no shorter to amend.
No, I know. I'm just saying we can amend what's already on the books without writing something totally
We're just
new.
adding another
We just
spot.
need to add to it.
Okay, so you're just referring to which section gets changed. Okay. Now I'm on board. That's fine, friendly. And Rebecca had something, then Sally actually. Rebecca was.
Okay, I just have a question. I don't know if it's an issue or not, but I know there are 2 current ADA parking spaces in the library lot.
Yes.
Now, would you look to give one of those up, or would you still need them? You still need that many? Okay.
I wrote you an email, didn't you get it, Rebecca?
Did you send it to my village?
I sent
You
you a
did?
village email, and I explained to you, we already had 2, but that wasn't the issue. The issue
I know,
was-
I understand the issue. I just didn't know if that would.
Yeah.
Okay.
What I
You still need, you need 3. Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
And it's obviously not exclusive to the library.
Right.
Right, oh, that I know, yes.
Adjacent to, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Sally, what was your?
What I would like to do is approve 2 designated handicap parking spaces. The first 2 spaces on the, is that the south, what, is that east or west?
Chase Bank is on the east.
Huh?
Chase Bank is on the east.
Okay, I would like to designate 2 handicap parking spaces. First 2 on the east side of Platico Avenue from Main Street. And the reason I think it should be 2 is that the village board can specify for the library a handicap space. And to ensure that people who are going to the bank and other places who are handicapped, but also leaving a space that would be available. Hopefully, one of those 2 would be available for library patrons. I would like to suggest 2 spaces instead of the 1 requested.
I'll accept that as a friendly amendment.
Will you accept that? Okay.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Your work piling up, Joe.
Maybe we set the hearing?
Well, we have to see the law first before we set the hearing. Unless you can have it. So what's your?
I mean, if you
things
set
are
it-
piling up, so I don't want to commit something that we can't, a deadline we can't meet.
Yeah, so your next meeting is the first meeting in July,
July 10th.
10th, yeah.
No, 10th, right.
which would mean you'd want it by the previous, what are you trying to do in terms of your agenda?
Thursday.
I would have to,
Thursday.
if we're going to have, if we were having a public hearing, I'd have to know a week in advance. I'd have to know it a week in advance.
So,
I could do it by then.
Okay.
So you could,
So set the
but
public-
that, so you would put the public hearing past that is what I'm,
Right.
don't do it.
after the 10th.
I will put
The second meeting of July.
17th.
Okay.
Or,
No,
no,
24th.
The 24th of July, where the hearing will be on the
Okay.
24th of July.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Liz, I know we're going to meet anyway at the Shade Tree, but you want to come up with, a lot of it was specific concerns about specific plantings or suggestions?
Yeah, it's relatively minor, nothing earth shattering.
Sure, come on up.
3 members of the Shade Tree Commission plus the village board liaison, Sally Rose, walked the site using the landscape plan portion of the bid plans for
Yeah.
this. And we came up with some observations. The first of which is that one of the trees that's recommended to be planted up here is a weeping hemlock. And we question that choice just because right now hemlocks are being attacked by a fungus called woolly adelgid. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Adelgid.
Adelgid, thank you. And it's hard to control, costly to
to deal with. And if a different species was there, then no cost would be incurred to, we just think if you switch it out to a different type of tree, we're saving ourselves some aggravation.
And all of this is in the email you sent, yeah?
Yes.
The details, great.
Yeah. Over here, we question, first of all, this key does not specify what an LT is. We thought maybe it means little tree, it might mean large tree, but
Yeah, I
it's
think,
not
those
on the,
existing? No, there's
no, it's
nothing.
not an existing. There is an existing light pole here.
Right.
We question planting a tree that will be that large near a light pole.
We'd have to, I think the plan is to take that light pole out.
Okay, and because we didn't have a complete set of plans, we didn't see whether that was suggested or not. And if the light pole were to remain, we were just going to suggest take the tree that's going to, its mature height will be shorter, just flip them around.
Right.
And I think that's pretty much
Well,
it.
great.
That's it?
Yeah, that was all we had. Now, I do have a request that, could we get a full set of plans?
Yeah, absolutely.
For that, so that we could do a more thorough and perhaps
Katie,
official
you
review.
saw the PDF of all of this, right?
We were going to recommend a we understood that the landscape architect wanted a soft tree. That's why
I don't know.
the hemlock
Is that what
was
it is?
recommended.
Yeah.
And we didn't,
Jason was going to check
Jason
into.
is going
Alternates?
to find
Jason
a
Rosenberg,
soft
yes.
Oh,
substitute
beautiful.
To come up
Yeah, that's
with-
what I was
but
gonna
he
ask.
had
Something edible.
But are you going to cut
probably. I don't know. Knowing Jason, it would be.
Exactly. No, that's why I got excited when you said his
Yeah.
name.
Okay.
So.
The mayor's going to join us at our
Yeah, and
next.
we-
At the next
And we've got
meeting,
some
yeah.
breathing room too, because we're looking at, by the time we got to the plantings, it'd be in the fall.
Yeah.
So- Because that's the best time to plant anyways, works out well.
That's what we thought.
Yeah, we've
So
got
we could
the summer to
review
figure
the
out
whole
the-
plan with
Yep.
you on the third Tuesday in July.
Perfect.
And yeah, because we didn't have a full set of plans, we have no idea. Please refer to planning note number 12.
Right.
And
You don't have plan.
we don't have planning note number 12, so that's another reason why we wanted to get a full set of plans.
And you know, I was talking to Liz before the meeting about the PDF, but because it's
So small.
I mean, I can enlarge it here, but if you're looking at copies of it,
Yeah.
I mean, if it's, I mean, you
I tried
probably,
printing
you
it
really
out.
have.
We have a large,
You could certainly
yeah, we
bring
have a
it.
large format printer now.
Don't we have a copy in the trustee's
Right.
office right now?
We can print off a new, is our large format printer up and running yet?
No, actually, it's not up and running yet. I need to set up the appointment whereby they will.
And,
All right.
and we don't need a full set to keep, we just
Right,
want
yeah.
one
I
to
can loan you my
work
set
with.
at least.
Yeah.
That would be
Absolutely.
great.
Okay, no
Yeah.
problem.
Thank you.
Kurt join us too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Provided you're available.
Third Tuesday in July.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So there's no action?
No, we got time to, well, we gotta figure out what the alternates are
Good.
to choose from.
Good.
All right, nothing, no one else here for anything specific? All right, moving right down the list. Joe, do you want to take over the issue of salary reductions? Since you had there were some legal questions asked. I don't know honestly whether this should, I'm assuming by default it's a public conversation. I'm gonna let you guys decide whether, where it goes with executive session or if it's suitable for public, whatever. Either
It's
way.
certainly, any privilege that would apply is your collective privilege to waive, frankly. So if you'd like me to comment, I can say that what I would put on the record is essentially what I provided to you in your memo. So that's up to you. So we can either do that in executive session, or if it's all right with you, I can say it here.
Well, we did it in public session before.
Yeah,
And it's
I
on the
think
agenda.
is that the consensus of the board?
I don't have a problem with
Okay,
talking
so
about it
here's,
publicly.
the board asked me to research the issue of the manner in which the mayor's salary was reduced in connection with the budget, the resolution to adopt the budget at the end of last year. Specifically, a question was raised as to whether or not that action had to be taken by local law with a public referendum. This is how I've advised the board. The general consensus or state of the law on the issue is that the reading of the statute in question, which on its face does plainly state that a reduction midterm of a public official's salary should be done by local law with referendum, that the interpretation of that is that that applies if the salary was adopted in the first place by local law, and that where it was adopted by resolution, it can also be amended by resolution. Now, having said that, and by the way, that's the conclusion that I came to based on my own independent research, my extensive research, although there is not a lot of precedent in this area. There is not a lot of case law interpreting this section, which is one of the reasons that it is an issue that has to be wrestled with. But it's my own extensive research on the subject. I also did reach out to the New York Conference of Mayors, which members of the public may or may not know is an association that we belong to, which is a resource for villages. And they have confirmed that, and you'll find that in their writings as well. Now, having said that, the opinions that were referenced by the mayor are out there and need to be acknowledged in this respect. The case law is a Supreme Court case in a different judicial district. New York State is broken up into judicial districts. Departments is actually what they're called in New York, in which a court took a contrary view, read that same provision to say, no, a resolution's not enough. All such actions must be taken by local law with a referendum. The comptroller's decision cited acknowledges, which is, I think, important to note, that the general state of the law is and has been, as I just stated it to you, but because of that Fourth Department case, followed suit and said, since the Supreme Court, which is essentially a higher authority than the comptroller in interpreting the law, has gone this way, will follow suit. The comptroller's opinions are on their face. They say this clearly, and this is true of Attorney General opinions as well, advisory opinions. They do not have precedent in terms of making law. The Supreme Court decision in the Fourth Department, because it's not our department, is also not binding on this department. So where does that leave you? It means that if the matter were not resolved and an action was commenced to challenge that change in salary by resolution only, a court in our department could certainly, they could adopt the logic of that Fourth Department case, they could reject it and ignore it. There's no way necessarily to predict what they would do, except again, to say that traditionally that provision has been interpreted the way that I first laid it out for you. At the end of the day, what that means is that there is some unpredictability, welcome to the law, to how the thing might ultimately play out. And so there are considerations of sort of the public interest in having it play out as a legal matter, as well as all the principles that were involved in modifying the salary in the first place. And so it starts with a policy decision and sort of a decision on the basis of what you believe to be the public interest at this level, because it's not something where, it's just not something where I can say, you're okay if you do it this way, don't worry if you do it that way, etc. It just doesn't set up that way. That's what I told the board, that's what I tell the public.
Comments from the board?
Would you also tell the board what the Constitution of the State of New York says?
Well, yeah. There is a provision in the New York State Constitution that talks about increasing or decreasing salaries of public officials during the term. It's the statutory law that we're discussing speaks to that issue and tells you how to accomplish it, should you do it.
But my question is to you is, were we, and I'm perfectly willing to admit, were we wrong by law to have increased it midterm to begin with? Because the issue is not just whether you can decrease something, but were we wrong to have increased it to begin with?
There is a separate provision in a separate section of law that talks about increasing salaries midterm, and it has, although there's essentially no case law that I found interpreting this particular provision, but you would imagine it would be interpreted the same way because it has almost the identical language. And so, again, it comes down to, if it was adopted by resolution, you can amend it by resolution. That is a position which has been supported in the past by law, by advisory opinion, right? And then again, there is this contrary provision, or this contrary holding in a judicial opinion, which cannot be summarily dismissed. I mean, you can't say that it wouldn't be adopted or couldn't be
But
adopted.
how does town law play vis-a-vis village law?
On this, it's a good question. The cases cited did deal with towns, not villages. There are different provisions of law, as you know, that the public may not. There is a town law and a village law in New York State law. The provisions referred to here actually come from the municipal home rule law, which would apply to all of them. So while I can't say with certainty that there might not be some arcane provision of village law that some court might say distinguish it, I do not see it. And my research didn't really reveal that as an avenue. If the logic were deemed appropriate, I think it would apply to villages and towns.
Any other comments or discussion? The floor is open, Mayor.
I'm just not sure what I'm supposed to be considering.
Joe?
What actually, because it's a newly constituted board, and I think, and I should apologize for this if I have used this nomenclature, I think many of us have. Because it's a newly constituted board, the action, if you were inclined to modify the salary in any which way, at this point, would really just be a new resolution as to the mayor's salary. That's really what it would be. I think we've talked about it as sort of restoring or reversing the previous resolution. That really wouldn't be what it is. This is a newly constituted board, so it's an issue before the board, and so you could do that by resolution. Now again, look.
It's a budget amendment.
It's a budget amendment is really what it is. And assuming nobody else withstanding would challenge the resolution question, then that decision would stand. And that's essentially what I believe the mayor has asked you to do, is to restore the salary. So you would do it by resolution and by an amendment to the budget. Now that might also require, you'd have to ask Nancy probably and consider yourselves, if you were inclined to do it, what other modifications to the budget were necessary in order to make that work. Or you would decline to act and nothing would change, in which case the mayor would have the right to challenge that former decision. At this point, that previous resolution is within the statute of limitations for it to be challenged. And that is why I'm sure one of the reasons that the mayor has asked for action fairly quickly, so that he doesn't lose that right.
Anyone?
So, Mayor, it seems to me that we're considering two issues. The first issue, which is what I was under the strong impression we were considering, was whether the action of the board was, that is, the action of the board by resolution during the approval of the budget was valid or invalid.
Right.
And I'm hearing you say that although there are cases in law that might confuse the issue, that the preponderance of opinion has been that village board acting by resolution in the course of budget approval can set salaries.
And because they do that by resolution, they can also modify
So
it
they
by
can also
resolution.
modify.
Right.
So I'm hearing you then, if I got this right, I'm hearing you say that we don't really need to do any action of any sort to recognize that the action of the board in the first place was, as far as we can tell, valid, legitimate, valid, within the law.
Right. If you did nothing, you would be taking the position that that was a lawful way to make that decision.
But even if we say that, we're not restricted from a further action, which would be to reconsider the salary of the mayor at some time, if we understand what the budgetary implications and so forth are.
That's correct.
I think I'm clear. I hope I'm, but I'm not sure.
No, I think that was a fair statement.
Though it's not a slam dunk, and that's, the position I'm in
It's not a slam
what,
dunk.
yeah, is that
Yeah.
there's it may just have, depending on how the board goes, it may just end up having a judge have to tell us which way we go.
Yeah. I would have liked that, but
I mean,
it wouldn't be the first time.
I really don't want to do that.
Yeah, I feel like this might be something that we would want to discuss in executive session.
What would you like to do?
Discuss in executive session.
The grounds for that, by the way, would, just to make clear if that's the decision that's made, would be that the clear implication is that one of the potential outcomes here tonight would lead to potential litigation. So I think it would be, again, it's not inappropriate to speak about it publicly, it's also not inappropriate to talk about it in executive session.
If they do go into executive session, because I understand that in this case, the mayor can vote on the issue.
That's correct.
So I don't want to recuse myself, but would I be recusing myself from the executive session? Or would I be?
Think so.
Depends
Okay.
on what Rebecca wants to discuss.
Okay. Well, is that, are you making that motion?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second to that?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion, I guess? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we'll go. Nay, I'm sorry, opposed? I didn't think you were.
No, I'm sure
Yeah,
Rebecca the
that's fine.
courtesy if she wants to.
All right. So we'll be back in
Although
a
I
few.
do think one thing needs to be said publicly, because the village attorney has indicated possible litigation. I believe that it needs to be stated that the village attorney advised us once and said he would have to recuse himself, and I believe that still stands.
Yeah, and so I'll speak to that because it has come up in the public
No, it did not come up in
forum.
public.
No, I mean, it's a concept that's been discussed, I know, in the public forum, and it's worth mentioning. I want to make clear that when I'm involved in discussions like this, where there may be a division in the positions of the board that may lead to litigation, any advice that you either hear me give publicly or that you know that for instance, we're going into executive session now, will always be limited to a statement of the law on the subject. Where I have to recuse myself, and will always recuse myself, is when one or more of the board members takes a position contrary to another and litigation is commenced, and they're looking for advice on how to sort of win that argument, I have to recuse myself. So I just want to be clear, any advice I give, and the farthest I will go in giving that kind of advice is always just to advise every member of the board on the state of the law. And then they will make decisions on what they want to do about that, and when they make those decisions, they would have to seek other counsel.
And given that statement, would you like to clarify for the record the report in the Daily Freeman that you gave advice to one particular board member?
Okay. People may be aware that in the recent decision of the district attorney not to prosecute criminal charges against the mayor with respect to his decision to vote in the last election, that one of the things that was suggested was that at least one of the bases for not pursuing that was that the mayor acted under advice from counsel and therefore lacked criminal intent in his action. That is the DA's call. I don't prosecute criminal actions. And the DA doesn't practice election law and doesn't practice municipal law. And there was, I think, an intimation in some of his statements that Jason acted on improper legal advice or bad legal advice. Bad legal advice. I've since spoken to the district attorney who has told me that he regrets that implication. And that in his mind, all that really happened is that he would have come to a different conclusion under election law as to the mayor's right to vote. But frankly, even that doesn't really play into any advice that the mayor got from me. It's a whole separate issue. So anyway, look, I will say the same thing as to that I said tonight. So I'm glad, I guess, that Sally made the segue. The advice that I gave the mayor and that I would have given any member of this board, and probably did when I was asked, was on what the election law says and what it has been interpreted to mean. That's a general statement of law. That is advice that I owe every member of the board if they ask. And then how the mayor applied his set of facts to that law is something on which he had to make a personal decision and as to which he could have sought his own counsel, frankly. But it's always appropriate for me to advise as to the general state of the law. And I would have given the same advice to any member of the board who asked about the mayor's situation or about their own. And in fact, more than one member of the board had an issue with respect to residency. So it is a complicated issue. It was an unfortunate statement. I think the DA has recognized that, and I'm comfortable with my counsel in this situation. Thank you. Thanks for that.
All right, we'll be back in a few minutes.
Wait, just to make sure that I have this correct. It was all 5 ayes, there were no nays, is that correct? Mm-hmm. Okay, I just want to make sure.
Are we going, you want to do that?
So this is becoming a little far-fetched, but cops come to the house and the person whose name is on the lease has just gotten that he wasn't there.
No, let's just say.
What did I get the other key? No, I got it.
So Armin, is there something in particular that's taking you to Mexico or just deciding to?
Well, actually, yes. Tim's kids, their mother, his ex-wife, is Mexican, and she speaks Spanish to them, and she wants them to be more immersed in the Spanish culture, and she's from Mexico, so there's this summer camp there that we are going to be sending them to, and so we're all going to Mexico. It's very, very progressive. But yeah, we're not really gonna go. We're not really going with her. She's actually taking the kids. We're gonna have some time on our own, and then we get the kids for 10 days, and she's gonna go with her boyfriend. So we're off.
Nice.
Yeah. But that's the main reason is that they will benefit from this whole thing. And I mean,
Rebecca was just here a minute ago.
what?
No, Sally said, "Where's everybody?" I said, "Rebecca was here just a second ago."
Where Jason and
He just
where Jason and Joe?
I think you're just getting smoked.
Huh?
Yo, smokers.
You think they're gonna-
I know.
I'll go look.
Okay.
Just don't light one up while you're out there.
I will be good. He's not in his office, right?
I don't think so. I really think you went to smoke.
I mean, I'll check.
No, they went outside, just borrowed one from it.
Smokers.
Why don't we just watch it about the electronic,
Where did you see that?
What was it, a joke you kept coming up?
Well, it sounds really neat.
Is it on history or?
Yeah,
Yeah, the electronic.
it'll be fun for sure.
Electronic.
one.
Joe, peddling and soliciting, you want to give us the highlights? I want to go line by line with it, and there's no one here. Yeah?
We would like, the board, that you were kind enough, we would like to continue that discussion at the end.
Yeah, no, I heard,
So
yeah,
we
no.
were going to ask that the peddling and soliciting and the rental be tabled until July 10th.
That's fine. Just one note on the rental, since we just got the landlord association comments, I was hoping to have the first conversation be about the draft I wrote, and then the second one about, yeah, so we can just look at, on the merits of the law I wrote, go through, because a lot, I think, had consensus, and there's really a few issues in the law. Except for one other comment too, that I think, if you look back in the rental law, the redefinition I wrote of rental housing to be anything where you exchange housing for money, could be useful for this 105 situation.
Could absolutely.
That's it,
Yeah, and I think that's that. Right. Yeah. No, keeping that. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of commonality, and there are.
Right. Like there's a couple clauses. Yeah.
I'm so sorry, I missed one of the things you were tabling. I know, I have your.
9 and 10.
9 and 10, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. No, 10
and 11.
10 and 11.
Okay, then I didn't miss it.
10 and 11 are the two that are
Yeah.
going to be.
Okay.
The legislative.
So
And
12.
how about 12? Should we table that for now, or just?
I don't.
We could quickly just say what we want to
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't planning on discussing it
No.
unless
Okay.
people had discussions. It's more like, you know.
Stating, okay,
Yeah.
that's fine, okay. So I think police info sharing would be next.
Yeah, I'll talk about this. So this came out of Bicycle Pedestrian Committee meeting essentially, and Bill Weinstein met with Randall, chair of the Police Commission. I brought it up at a Police Commission meeting, and Kurt Lavala has also spoken with, I believe, the chief. And they basically told us part of it is because they do not have the hardware and software needed in order to produce these kinds of records. Because Bike Ped, we were talking about safety and how, why is it that we hear about accidents through the grapevine? And so we discussed the police blotter, this is now the second time you're hearing about this, New Paltz Times. A police blotter in the newspaper that might be one of the ways that information can be disseminated to the community, but what we were told basically is that we have to foil it because of the nature of the specifics. And so my issue isn't necessarily with foiling it, but with streamlining this process for any other committee that one of you might be the liaison to that might be going through something similar, where they haven't really even gotten to the step of, well, the police have this information, we'd like to foil it. And they essentially said, fill out the FOIL request, leave the date blank, and send in the same FOIL request with a new date, like quarterly, for instance, so you can have this information on at that rate, basically. And Bike Ped seemed fine with that, and this is something I guess you will now be carrying. But they seemed okay with that process. But if we're going to be doing it, should we be foiling other things at once that your committees might want? And this isn't necessarily for us to answer now, but we can keep it in mind.
Can we put this on a joint town-village board?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Because I would think that there are town committees, the TIC is a joint committee.
I know.
And I think that if the police department realized this was important information, we shouldn't have to foil, we could agree to do it.
Right.
So could we do that?
Absolutely. I mean, and I think that this might also give some teeth to the idea that, there's this very expensive software that would allow for data manipulation, essentially, and for extracting data in a very different way. Like, we have no idea, when there's a call, we really don't know how many officers respond to that call, for instance. And part of it is that we can't really extract the data in like an easy way. Even the reports that the police commission gets take so much time.
What does this software cost?
I think it's in the range of $60,000.
60?
Yeah.
Can we get a grant?
I believe that this is what was talked about at police commission meeting. They found other ones that I think were in the $40,000 range. I mean, it's the installation, the maintenance, the data transference. It's like all these different things that it would involve, and I think it's just the software is expensive. So it's a fairly ridiculous number, is what I recall from police commission meetings. But this could help us, give merit to the idea that maybe we should spend that money, and then officers' time won't be spent on these reports in the same way.
Right.
So anyway, that's really what that was. So if you have any committees that are interested in foiling as well, we can start doing that together, and then we can put this on our next village town joint agenda.
I would really prefer we put it on the joint board agenda. Foiling is a negative.
I agree.
I think it would be much better if we tried to do it positively and cooperatively.
That's why I called it information sharing.
Yes, I like that much better.
But all right, cool. Well, thank you, everybody. Unless anyone else has anything else on that.
That's fine.
Let's see, we have, let's go down my list, actually. We've got the Ethics Board. We had our public comment. Joe, no problem adopting that tonight?
No.
I'll move we adopt it.
Second.
Any discussion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll move the same for
The OCR application.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'll move to appoint Kurt Lavala as our representative to the Ulster County Planning Board with Maurice Whiteman as an alternate.
Second.
You recommend to us for the board to nominate him to the Ulster County Legislature.
That doesn't go to the does
Yes,
it?
it does.
Okay, well, wherever it goes.
You are
We'll do the
recommending
paperwork.
to the board to nominate Kurt Lavala as the village planning board
Okay.
member, and Maurice would then continue. He's
As the
already the alternate,
Yeah,
is
yeah.
he not?
Right.
He is, yeah.
Okay, and so then we vote on that and send it to
So moved.
the Ulster County
Is there a
Legislature.
second?
Second.
Any
Second.
discussion? All in favor?
And so Kurt wrote up the resolution that we need to send.
Yeah, I'll just sign that and
So-
send it up, yeah.
May
I'm
we
just making sure everyone is aware.
have support for a newspaper article soliciting volunteers for all of our committees that may have vacancies?
So moved.
Seconds?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the historic preservation, Katie can just mention whether we're gonna put the booklet up on the website. We're gonna do that anyway, right?
Well, the booklet is not, I guess it isn't in its final form. They're going to put the final edits on it now that they know that we can put it on the website.
see, okay.
That was one of their big, they didn't, move quickly on their final edits and revisions just because they didn't think it was possible. I made clear at our last commission meeting that it is, and so Katie and Val have been in touch since.
Have we gotten,
As for the, sorry, what's that?
did we get the whole website question straightened out, and is our agenda for this meeting on? Okay, good.
Is it? Oh, that is, yes, it is. The other issue about the business cards or email addresses we're looking into simply because it's not a bad idea, obviously, if they all want their email addresses, but when you extend it to all of our boards and commissions, you approach 50 different email accounts. So I'm just checking with Brian Macaluso, texting us to make sure that's
That we
not
can handle
added
that?
cost or,
Okay.
yeah, just want to make sure before we
And I
open
would
that
you
for
know that
everybody.
Brian's coming to see me on Tuesday, the 8th,
Oh,
to
good.
see what's wrong with why emails that I'm sending aren't going through.
Okay, good.
And why I'm not getting some.
All right, beautiful.
Okay, good.
So if I
And
figure
we
it
did
out,
have
yeah, I'll
we
let you
did have
know.
an issue over the weekend if there was something. I mean, I got a ton of spam out of nowhere, and then the system slowed down for some reason over the weekend. Brian's still looking into
I've
it.
gotten no spam, but
I did for a while.
I haven't
Brian
gotten every
fixed that.
email that everybody sent to me.
And it took hours to get Google to let me upload the redacted. I mean, it did. It went up that weekend. There was no problem. Once I could get through, there wasn't a problem. But it took hours to upload.
But that brings me to mind, Brian says that he does not know, I don't know about anybody else, but when you go to the village email account, it is very slow. Very slow.
Yeah, there's something going on. Brian
He
said.
says that that's an interfacing problem with Time Warner, and you've got to get involved with it.
I'll find out what he's talking about.
Okay?
Yeah.
Just tell him that I told you what he said.
It could be the cable coming into the building. We've been looking at upgrading that.
No, he had another reason.
I'll talk to
Yeah.
Brian. Well, if it
But
costs
it's
money, we'll
very
bring it.
slow.
If we can do it without money, we'll just do it. If it costs money, we'll bring it back to the
Okay.
board. All right.
It may cost money.
One other thing briefly, you all got the email, but just to sum up for people watching, I had pulled together a group of people I knew were interested in solar power to see, I had some ideas, but and also to get theirs. And one thing they liked was an email I sent last fall about the possibility that we might theoretically be able to replace all of the streetlights in the village in one fell swoop. Because right now we pay, I think, $65 grand a year to Central Hudson in rent for the lights we have. So the idea, at least my sketch, was kind of historic lights that were freestanding, solar, not networked, so they weren't tied to the grid, and you could use them if you had enough solar and the right size battery. You could do things like have a socket for people to charge things, or have a bench, or bike, whatever, Wi-Fi hub, all sorts of bells and whistles. So what I thought was going to be like a 6-month little project and meetings turned into snowball, and we have an offer from a grant writer to, if the numbers work out, to see if we can apply in this summer's CFA round to just do it, to replace all our streetlights. So what I'm looking for is kind of conceptual. I don't want to go any farther than, it happened fast, like 3 days. We had a group of 12 people willing to do this work. So before we go any farther, I want to kind of get the board's blessing to move forward with this, with the understanding that whatever we would do, we bring back to the village board to actually submit. But we just want to write something up for consideration, and since it's a tight window, I wanted to get on tonight.
I raised 3 questions with Jason about this. Number 1, Central Hudson has by rights, they own their poles. And that, I
Joe,
don't
this is
know
something.
what that
This
means.
is something you're going to have to look into.
Yeah, this is something you're going to do. They have district lighting, okay, not forming districts. They own the light poles, they own the electrical right-of-way. In order to change over, it is my understanding you have to have the Public Utilities Commission permission, and then you have to buy from Central Hudson those rights.
Well, we'll find. I've never heard that before, so
Okay.
obviously something we have to find out. I know with power distribution, it's
Right.
that way, but I don't think. I think we just stop paying rent on their lights, and they can come take them away.
What I wanted, something I wanted to suggest before we get overly involved in this, would it be possible to set up one on a pole in village-owned property like our parking lot? One experimental solar light to see its effectiveness, how much it costs, how much is involved, if something should go wrong and it needs to be replaced, do we have the people and the manpower and the knowledge to do that kind of thing? So I would like to suggest before we go whole
Well,
hog,
that's what we're going to be
we
discussing.
do one.
Well, we're going to we're going to have work up some numbers on what this would cost and all of that. If going with a smaller pilot program becomes more effective, that's the conversation we have.
And I also want to remind everybody that if this does succeed, and you do it, you have to factor not only in the cost of what it will cost to do, but the loss of your gross utility tax.
If I want to look into the relationship with that tax, so I'm not sure we lose it. But
You would
again,
lose it.
I have to find out. We have to find out. If we lose that revenue, it obviously affects the
If you're
math.
not using Central Hudson, dear, I think you lose the utility tax.
I don't know enough about it, but maybe you're right. We'll find out. All right. Is that is
By the
everybody?
way, I like the idea of this project a lot. I don't know anything at all about the feasibility in detail, but I like the notion that we could plan for the future to install solar lighting that would replace the electrical grid supply.
And this hits a couple of nice targets too. You've got the environmental issue, and you've also got the public safety issue. If all the math works out, the system would be designed to ask the standard for this, because you can have a solar streetlight that goes for as long as you want and as bright as you want, which is the size of the solar panel and the size of the battery, right?
If you go around parts of New Jersey, I don't know if all of New Jersey, but I know in Montclair and Clifton, every other telephone pole has a solar panel attached to it. And I don't know exactly what they have going on there, but maybe that's
And you get the
place you
LED
could
lights,
use
all
that.
sorts of things.
Look
But
at it as an
think of the
example.
public safety angle. If we do have one of these storms, if one of these hurricanes, San Irene, had shifted a month or two later, it would have been ice storm coming down. We have a blackout in the Northeast. having streetlights in the midwinter blackout would be an enormous public safety angle too. So there's a lot of community good that theoretically could happen, just a matter of seeing whether the
I
theory
mean,
gets the practice.
I'd like to see all
Great
the.
idea, but it's like a lot of things, I wanna know what the
Oh,
consequences
absolutely. We're not ready to rush
if it
anything.
doesn't work.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
obviously.
Because I don't want blackouts in New Paltz when everybody else
Of course,
has
yeah,
lights.
exactly. But yeah, give us, so we just want your kind of blessing, informal blessing to just get some better
Yes.
numbers to the board and we'll go from there.
And do an experiment, yeah.
Yeah, all right, so unless there's nothing else on the agenda, no, I don't see anything.
We're gonna,
Except for executive session. Because we have to have a brief conversation with the union contract and then continuing the conversation from earlier. Yeah, those should be very brief though. So I'll move to go into executive session to discuss the personnel issues.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
but there will be other things as we go along. Is I wanna work with Ariana to get our parking plan completely implemented. It's in phases and we have started, we laid out the long-term parking lot with blue, and we wanna get that done. I'd like to propose that it be on the joint town-village agenda for discussion, the notion that we have talked about, but we had other things pressing on us, and that is a comprehensive plan for the community, both the town and the village, a new master plan. It is so outdated. My colleague, Mr. Rocco, is very interested in this and certainly chaired the committee for the village. I think it's something, we have the planner, that's one of the reasons we hired him, and get it going. And the third thing I want to do is, and it's almost done, is bring before the joint board the parade club's recommendations, which are taking care of clarifying events, parades,
Right,
and
yes.
all, and park use. Those are mine.
Well, I would like to commit myself to working on a comprehensive plan with Kurt and Sally. Sally is also interested in doing it. I'm very interested in the solar power thing, but you may have more horsepower already than you need.
You can always use more.
Well, but I'll probably trail along on that. I would be very interested in working on a proposal for a plan for installing rain gardens throughout the village. And I would like very much to work on a complete streets RAND proposal as well.
Which fits since we're in the middle of a moratorium for zoning code updates. And
So-
and the planning board would want to help on that, yeah.
So those would be
B3
three projects. that
Also
I'd like
for the
to work on.
B3.
I love the B3, but see, I've loved that from Ford, from when I first learned.
And we finally got it done after 2 years.
Yeah.
But we need some streetscape.
It's been
So I understand. Well, you already all know the major project because I emailed you about them. Municipalizing our waste collection to have mandatory curbside composting run by the DPW, including curbside, I'm sorry, I said curbside composting, including all restaurants. Possibly forming a public power utility, ideally run on solar or as close to clean power as it can, which again is another project that looks feasible initially. Finishing the Peace Park project, the solar streetlights, and there's about a dozen more, but those are my work for the summer. Oh, I'm sorry, also the tenant landlord law and bringing back the type 1 action law to protect all of our environmental resources in one fell swoop, as long as we have a planning board that can be flexible. But yeah, I think that's between now and winter, that's my plan.
Okay. All right, I want to look into alternatives expansion with the loop bus system. And I actually emailed today Hector Rodriguez, our county representative, to see if I can work with him on that. Municipal garbage I'd also like to work on. I definitely think that we should have our own system. Again, Katie, my recycling has not been picked up in 2 weeks.
I'll have to beat someone.
as diligent as you have been. And also edible landscapes. So basically, I think there's a number of committees within the village and town who would be interested in working on this as well. And that was what we were mentioning with the new park layout, is the hemlock that needs to be reconsidered. I think it would be great to have an edible
Yeah.
tree of some sort there, whether it be berry bushes or
Got the
what have you.
sweet things.
So, okay, and that's the main. Oh,
So they're
also,
eating berries and fall into the.
well, you know, we'll have fun. So, I also, with the edible landscapes, someone posted or sent me a online mapping system that's actually worldwide, that you can plug in edible plants and trees in your communities. Yeah, there's a mulberry tree right outside of Family of New Paltz, and I added that to the list. So it's like,
Don't
you know.
you add mine?
No, don't worry about it. Yeah, it overhangs the street, therefore it's pretty much, you know.
It's publicly accessible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really
awesome.
cool. So
Do you have
do that.
Jason Rosenberg's
Contact information?
would you
I don't, but I'd love to. Yeah. Oh, believe me, we talk about him at work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause he would love to.
Yeah, and that would be a
Yeah.
good thing for the shade.
He could actually map. He runs all these edible
oh
walks.
my God. Yeah. I'd love to tell him about that. We would like.
I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. I'm done.
So aside
excited
from
here.
obviously wanting to work on all of your projects, because I really like everything, and Jason and I have, had meetings with a number of different people surrounding municipal solid waste. I'm sorry that I'm going away and I'm not going to be able to make a July 11th meeting, but I look forward to hearing what happens. But I'm going to be working with Sally on our parking plan. One of the big thing, it kind of really dovetails well with the complete streets which Tom would like to work on. And I think that's, all of that has to do with us moving forward as a community, being accessible and progressive, which is also coupled with Kurt and I have been having meetings as this board, well, maybe it was the former board actually, but either way, I'm sure that you won't be against this, sustainable building and design, essentially, so that we can have, it's so much more involved than I originally.
Very good component for the master plan.
I think it would be a great component for the master plan, but I think our goal is actually to have something to present to this board by September, because that's when the moratorium is officially up, even though I have a feeling we're going to be looking at that 6-month extension.
We're always talking about whether we need one.
Right, but that's why we figured we'd at least have something for this board to look at by September, and I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that we can meet that self-set deadline. But we've been finding a lot of different resources, and there's communities around the world. Faubang, Germany is they started from scratch. It wasn't an already existing community. It was a military community that they were able to transform. But they have all these really amazing things implemented that I think we can try to do here at least, or at least force developers to build. But so that's one of my things. And then another, and this is something I'm actually hoping to work with you on, the fire department, I think is badly in need of a new firehouse. And there are communities that have gotten really great grant funding to build a green firehouse. And I think it would, there's a number of safety reasons why we need a different setup, aside from having 4 trucks and 3 bays, and just the amount of time that it takes for a fire to double in size, which there's some discrepancies about. Some say 30 seconds, some say a minute, but regardless, it takes that time to get into the fire truck with the setup they have now. And if we can get this mostly paid for, it would really put us on the map in a different way. But so I've had very preliminary conversations, and the ball is more in some of the members' court than mine, because I am not an expert on what a firehouse needs. But
They've been talking about this for a long time.
Well, the need has been there for a number of years.
But
Yeah.
it would also eliminate the villages having to pay rent for Fire Station 2.
Yes.
And because that's
Ideally, it
what
would
do you
be
call that, a
Fire Station
prefab firehouse? Perhaps if we could achieve this, we could move the prefab across the river in emergencies.
Right.
Because Jason and I know there's no place to house a
Yeah.
fire truck over there.
Sitting in-
There's
sitting-
an
they end up
emergency,
sitting in
and
a
that
truck.
would be a great place if we knew we were gonna have a problem just to
Yeah,
So I think
and I
that's
and I
a
think a
terrific
lot about
idea.
like all these like young guys who want to be farmers and who are really into the environment and into doing something physical, but wouldn't necessarily think about volunteering. And this would totally, you know, I think it would shift that, and then we could maybe
I'm in
it
on
would help
helping you
rebuild
with that.
morale in a number
Okay.
of ways. So, but yes, I figure, you know, I'm working with some of them, and I'll keep you in the loop on this, so that we can have something more formal to present to all of you. I just wanted you to know this is like, you know, really think we should move forward.
Yes. To get big grants if we do it totally green.
Yes.
Well, let's see what,
Community service.
let's see what
I'm glad you're all
our group comes
supportive.
up with. All right, so I'll move to go into executive session to discuss. All in
Aye.
favor?
Bye.